Hey there, and welcome to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show, a podcast for paradigm changers. Each week I speak with another influential leader who's changing the conversation for their audience, their industry, and this world. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to the show. Okay, my friend, welcome. So glad you're here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait to talk with you.
Yeah. I'll never forget being at Wisdom 2.0 the first time we met, going out for dinner with all those crazy cats, and just feeling an immediate connection to you. I'm really delighted you're here. You're someone who has this really amazing balance, in my experience, of being a true thought leader with a really great reach. You are super connected to a whole lot of people in the industry, and you've just got this lovely down-to-earth spirit. You're just you, and you've always just been you ever since I met you, and I so appreciate it. So anyway, thank you for being here. So I want to do a few things. I want to set up this conversation for the listeners a bit, and we'll dive in. You're an expert on parenting as kind of like large umbrella, and I would say conscious parenting underneath that. So I want to talk a little bit about your work around parenting. I want to talk about your work as it applies to running businesses and conscious businesses, and where you feel the crossovers might be, especially parenting ourselves as we show up as entrepreneurs and all that stuff. Then I want to learn a little bit about your journey as a thought leader and kind of your path to saying, no, this is my voice and this is the work I'm here to do. And this is the conversation I'm here to lead in this market, and what that's been like, and what folks can learn from you and your journey around thought leadership in general. So let's start here. So I know you I think one of the big things you're known for is parenting without power struggles. I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit about your work at a high level.
Okay. Yes, I can do that. I was a teacher, and then I became a marriage and family therapist, and had a practice where I was working with kids largely, and the parent would report that the kid was difficult or uncooperative or unhappy or anxious, and I would work with the child and get the child to hopefully open up and make some shifts and modifications. But then the child always went home to the same parent, and in that kind of petri dish of that family, as things were, just working with a child didn't really address what I saw as what would be needed to actually institute real change in the dynamic and the child's instinct to cooperate versus be defiant. And so I started doing workshops for parents. And eventually those things kind of coalesced into this first book that I wrote, Parenting Without Power Struggles. And I incorporated a lot of the things I had been learning about why we have power struggles, like what promotes that kind of resistance from a child to a parent. When a baby's born, they're completely and utterly dependent on that parent, and the bond hopefully is starting to flourish and grow and deepen and all that. So what happens that I get these kids in my office who don't want to do what their parents ask them to do, aren't open to their advice, and when the initial thing was this deep love affair, and I think I started to see the dynamic as having to do with the quality of the connection between the child and the parent, and how the child experienced being in the presence of their parent. And then I wove in a lot of elements from my own personal life, including the work of Byron Katie and my own meditation practice. I had started meditating when I was about 16 or so, 15, 16 in Kansas in the 70s, early 70s.
As you do.
And so, all these things were coming together to try and get a different picture of the dynamic between a parent and child. Why are there power struggles? Because I know that when we're deeply connected to someone, we feel seen and liked and celebrated and understood and connected with them. We don't want to be resistant or obstinate. there's a natural instinct in us to cooperate with and listen to people with whom we feel a close and safe connection. And of course, a lot of us did not grow up with a close and safe connection with our own parents. We didn't have what's called secure attachment. We might have had the anxious or avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment, ambivalent. And we are struggling to do something different with our own kids, especially if we have some kind of path that we're on to better ourselves or break free of some of the constraints. So that shows up as the parent as well in that dynamic. How do I show up differently? How do I forge a new path that's different from what I experienced? And so I ended up doing a lot of work with parents and then wrote the book, and then I'll see where you want to go next.
Beautiful. I'm curious, one of the things that I know my guidance always tells me about my life's mission is that we're here to activate a new story for humanity. And that, every guest I have on this show is, in my opinion, activating a new story in another arena of life. From real estate to business to parenting to everything in between. I'm curious if you were to say, like, yeah, here's what I think the story of parenting has been, and here's what I think the new story of parenting might be.
Beautiful question. Wow. I think what it's been has been that we have children. It's very easy, but not always easy, but it doesn't, it typically, Eckhart Tolle wrote the introduction to my second book, and he wrote that it takes more training to get a driver's license than to become a parent.
Right.
So having the baby, if everything's working okay, isn't really that difficult. And so there you have the baby, and you sort of fall into step with what your parents and perhaps grandparents and great-grandparents did, which is you feed the baby, you keep the baby clean, you get the baby to sleep, you educate the baby, you civilize the baby, and that's sort of the construct. That's what you're
Job.
doing. That's the job.
Yeah.
You're kind of ushering this newborn through the various stages of childhood and adolescence into their own adult life, and God bless, good luck, kind of.
Right. I love that phrase, civilizing the baby. That's our job. And if I look at like how I think about, what I often see as parenting, or the historical view of parenting, or parenting and how we saw it on TV growing up, like, yeah, civilize this kid so they can be a productive member of society. Job well done, parent. Done.
Do this, don't do that. That's wrong. This is right. I see it really differently. I see that, first of all, it's a miracle. Like, we are miracles. The fact that you're sitting there, I'm sitting here, my heart is beating. Every once in a while I have an echocardiogram of my heart, and they'll show me, they'll turn the screen, and there's the boom, boom, and you hear it in the room. They'll put the sound up, boom, 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 and I just start weeping. Like, what? Like, how is that happening? Because I don't know how to make that happen. And then you start magnifying the picture, and you think about, how is my eye seeing? How are my ears hearing? How am I moving through space? And the whole thing is way, way, way nothing to do with me. So then you get this baby and you go, wow, what just happened? And to me, it's just, you have embarked on a path of a miracle. And that, yes, it is also about civilizing and ushering and shepherding that child through life to have hopefully the best possible shot at a good adult life as you can. But it's also about us. Like, I see parenting as the ultimate spiritual or transformational path. Nothing has moved me to grow and change like being a mother. Like, forget it, because I have not been motivated like this. Like, I have now a 31-year-old son who you've met, and
who's amazing.
Just love him to pieces, and he's a beautiful human being, and like, it still motivates me to look at my stuff and to grow and have hard conversations and work through old imprinting that I brought into my parenting life from my own, the various elements of my childhood that were not so healthy. Nothing would motivate me. When you look at the path of transformation, or you look at those of us who are interested in growing, and sometimes we take courses or we take classes. I'm taking one right now with my husband on ADD and marriage. It's just so cool. Well, why am I taking it? Because I'm motivated. But I'll tell you something, the motivation I have for that is not even close to the motivation I have had in my life to be a better human being, to heal my insides, to wake up so that I could show up for this child of mine in a way that would give him a greater health and connection and security and all that. So I think parenting was about, sort of the mechanics and the tasks associated with raising a child. And now I see it as that and so much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In a little bit, I have two questions that I solicited from my sister-in-law.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you about those before we go too far into this. I want to, so, what I hear, if I bottom line that new story of parenting, is that parenting is the ultimate spiritual journey.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Can be. Yeah. There's a couple places I want to go. One of the things you say that I just adore is that we're not raising children, we're raising adults.
Mm.
How does that distinction work?
Well, we are also raising children, but I think we lose sight of what we're doing. So you've got a 3-year-old or you've got a 7-year-old, and they're unhappy about what you made for dinner, or they're not wanting to go to bed, or they're being mean to their sibling, and that becomes what you fixate on. Like, how can I get him to go to bed? How can I get her to just do the homework and not gripe about it? And that is for real, and I'm in that business. I have 35 master classes on everything from, chores to anxious kids to all of it. So we cover the pragmatics. But there's also the element of that child, if you blink a few times, will tower over you. And then will eventually...
And yours definitely does.
And mine does. It's 6'5", 6'6". And will eventually just, for hopefully the majority of their life, they will be living an adult grown-up life. And so every interaction that we have adds up in these microscopic ways to influencing the human being, the adult that your child will grow into. Will they be flexible, or will they become aggressive and angry when they're frustrated or thwarted? Will they be compassionate and empathetic, or will they be very self-absorbed and self-centered? Will they want to talk through things when they have conflict, or will they shut down and turn away, or end relationships when they aren't working well? Like, all the things that we do with them on a day-to-day basis affect the skills, the resources, the abilities, the understandings that they're going to take with them into their adult life, and how you speak with your children, and how they see you setting boundaries for yourself, and whether you read, whether you take classes or practice meditation or yoga. These are all things that give these subtle, unspoken impressions of how to grow, how to be an adult. And and when we give in to our kids because we're afraid of their upset, for instance, a child's frustrated, they're thwarted, they want something, we're not going to let them have it. There are so many ways of approaching that, and one of the ways that we often do that, if we give in, for instance, in a way we're saying, I don't have faith in your capacity to cope with this disappointment. And that child, if they're denied the opportunity... Yeah.
Hold up. If we give in to their desires when we otherwise have a boundary, what we're saying is, I don't have faith in your ability to cope with this disappointment. All right, Susan Stiffelman, just laying it down. Sorry, I just needed to stop
Yeah,
right
no,
there
it's a
because
big, I'm so impressed that you caught that because it is huge.
it's huge.
And now
Yeah.
you've got the 35-year-old who didn't have the 8,000 experiences of surviving disappointment under the loving, compassionate care of an attached, attuned parent to walk them toward their tears or their sadness. Now we have an adult who can't, who stalks the girlfriend when she breaks up with him, who, yells at the contractor when he has to delay showing up because they haven't developed the internal structures to cope when life isn't going their way. And we inadvertently promote that when we deny our kids the chance to, again and again, with loving care, live through not having life be the way that they would like so that they can discover resilience and develop that from a really genuine internal place, not just a cerebral, hey, everybody should be resilient.
Yeah. There's something you talk about the captain, the lawyer, and the
Yeah, sure.
dictator. Will you walk us
Yeah,
through
yeah,
that
yeah.
just a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm glad this is video. So everybody, imagine that my right hand represents the parent, and my left hand is going to represent my child. Okay, right hand above the left hand, parent hand above the child, is what I call right relationship, and I call this being the captain of the ship for your kids. Meaning that if you were a passenger on a ship, you might have a meal with a captain and tell a few jokes. But if you heard the whoop whoop of the ship alarm that something's wrong, you want to see a captain who takes charge, who's confident, who stays calm, who doesn't leap over the side of the ship like, oh my God, what's happening, right? So this is what our children need and really thrive on is when we hold that place. And in my courses and work, I talk about it a lot in terms of regulation, that we are regulated, we're stable, we're sturdy. When the child might say, I want 3 cookies before dinner, and we say, sweetheart, I know how good these cookies are, but we're going to have dinner soon, and we'll have to wait till tomorrow afternoon for more cookies. But why, says the child, because you won't eat your dinner. Yes, I will. No, I gave you cookies yesterday and you didn't eat it. Well, that's because yesterday you had a stupid dinner and I hated it. Well, no, that was something you eat at grandma's all the time. Yeah, but you don't make it like grandma. Okay, so we've gone from captain of the ship where you're in charge to this where I call this the 2 lawyers.
And this is your fist side by side.
Nobody's in charge here. There's arguing, there's pushing and pushing back. You have power struggles here. And then if you start to get more and more dysregulated, or your child starts to escalate, get more angry or loud, upset, then we can go here. And we're now feeling out of control or intimidated or out of our depth. And because that's an uncomfortable feeling and we want to be up here, we intimidate or threaten because it makes us feel more powerful. And I call this the dictator because it feels like the child's calling the shots. If you don't let me have cookies, I'm not eating your stupid dinner. Well, then fine, go to bed without supper. Just go to your room right now, right? And so I call it the dictator because dictators don't actually have any power. They rule by fear and intimidation, or they wipe out your bank account. So where we want to be is here. And everything I teach, every class, every program, my membership, month after month, we're working on how to clean up what's going on inside so that you can show up as the captain of the ship. And that means that when your child is disappointed or wants something and you aren't going to say yes, that there isn't a neediness in you. You don't need your child to like you. You don't try and force them to listen to the explanations or the justifications. You're just present with them. Sweetheart, I can see how desperately you wanted that, and it looks like it doesn't seem fair that I'm not letting you. Is there anything more you want me to know? And you're giving them room to go to know, okay, thank you.
Yeah. So fascinating. I am seeing so many parallels between this and working with clients, right? Especially if you're really a master of your craft. Are you holding that captain place and saying, without dictating, saying, given my expertise, here's where we need to go.
Nice.
Right? Or partnering with them in that quest. Or are they, man, I sometimes hear clients who, about their clients, well, clients being very pushy. Just earlier today, my housekeeper was talking about a client being very pushy, and they're in lawyer mode,
Yeah.
right? No, I want you to come at this time. Well, I can't come at this time, but and she's having a hard time setting boundaries, and they're
Yeah.
right, and sometimes her client moving into dictator, and I see this
Right.
so often with how we relate to our clients. Are we in that captain of the ship? Not a dictator.
No.
I know because I'm the guru. That's not what I'm talking about. But you're in my world because, like, people get into your world because you have 30 years of expertise in this arena. Um, I
40.
want to read. Yeah, good. uh, I want to read two texts from my sister-in-law.
Okay. Oh, good.
I
Let's hear
said
it.
who adores you.
Oh, okay.
When they were pregnant with their first one, parenting without power struggles was an early book as a gift.
Oh, thank you.
And she's like, "Oh my God, you're interviewing Susan."
Mm.
So I'm going to ask you two questions, and I want to talk a little bit about parallels between this and business, and then I want to talk about your journey as a thought leader. So, first question. I find it difficult to be captain of the ship in times of stress, such as leaving for school. Lately, our 3.5-year-old son has been throwing tantrums, leaving for school, typically about the clothes he wears. He often doesn't like the pants he's wearing. Even though we start out with plenty of time to get out the door, we're often running out the door at last minute, screaming with a toddler in tow. This often leaves me screaming at some point, which seems effective because he will listen. Since I know a good ship captain would never scream at the passengers, I feel incredibly guilty at drop-off. I have two questions. One, how much damage am I doing by screaming at him? This never includes insulting him. And two, do you have any tips to maintain captain without hitting the iceberg?
Nice. What beautiful language around those. No damage, zero, if you make
So we can
repair.
take the guilt and the shame away.
Yeah. Um, in fact, what we aspire to in my world is being a good enough parent, not a perfect parent, and whatever that is. And and the beauty of those moments when you lose it and you're just beyond your rope is that you can do repair. And this is something I talk about a lot in my work, that this is how we really teach children. Again, if we're looking at raising an adult, not just a child, one of the greatest skills that an adult can have is to learn how to make repair, how to deliver a genuine, full-hearted apology, and learn from the conflict so that you can grow closer. I mean, this is in everyone I'm close to, just about most of my really close and important relationships. There have been moments when there have been misunderstandings or something that had to be worked through, and you come out the other side of that feeling more open, more connected with that person. So with children, you will lose your cool because it's impossible to raise children. It's just really super hard, and we don't change species just because we become a parent. We don't become a saint. We're just still us, so I wouldn't worry about that. I like that you talked about the iceberg. So one of the things that I say a lot is that if you're being the ship captain, you are using your radar, meaning you don't want to be the passenger on a ship where the captain just sort of leaves and starts sailing that away, because we know that that's where, Jamaica is, and hope that things work out. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
hope that they will use radar and notice when there's a storm and plan a different route, or notice when there's going to, if you're going up toward Alaska, that these are where the icebergs are. You don't want to just sort of wing it. And so a lot of the things that we think are random problems are actually quite predictable. When you've got a 3.5-year-old who is his developmental imperative is to assert himself, to establish that he has agency, and is practicing what it is to say, I don't want to do that, I want this, and then change his mind 50 times. So we look more at what are the likely places where this thing's going to deteriorate. Starting, and she's starting with plenty of time, or so she says, but maybe it's not plenty of time. The other thing that, so a lot of families, I'll have them work with their child to have an outfit the night before, or maybe two, and to talk through with your 3.5-year-old to say, sweetheart, I wonder how it is for you in the morning when we're yelling, especially when mommy's yelling. How is that for you? And you be your nephew.
Mm-hmm.
You play the part
like
of your nephew. Yeah, I didn't think so. And can I tell you, I don't like it either. I just don't feel very good about it because I love you so much and I want us to be happy and huggy when we're going to school. Would you like to work with me on that?
Okay.
Well, I was wondering what do you think would be a fun way to make sure that you know what kind of pants you want to wear in the morning? Do you have two pants that you really like?
No.
No. Do you have any pants that you like?
No.
No pants. Well, that sounds like a problem. So I wonder, have you ever had pants that you liked?
Yes.
Well,
I
tell me
like
about
my jeans.
You like your
But
jeans.
you threw them away because they got too small.
That's true. That might have been a little bit of a sad day for you and your jeans, huh?
Yeah.
Bye, jeans. Are you a little bit upset that those jeans aren't there anymore?
I liked those jeans.
Those were your favorite. So it sounds like we need to find a new couple of favorites.
Okay.
I was wondering, well, let's go and get all your jeans out on Saturday, all your pants, and see if any of those might win. We could have like a contest and see which of the 2 or 3 jeans. So you include the child. I'm out of the role play. You include the child.
Yeah.
Not in the heat of the moment. And maybe you even, now one of the things we know about highly sensitive children, I don't know if this applies to your nephew or kids who have some sensory sensitivities, and I'm like this. I just bought 2 pair of pants that I sent back because just didn't feel good. Just didn't feel right.
Yep.
So for some kids, it's the texture, the breathability, the tag. And you're not going to talk them out of that. So I would be looking to see what you can discover that might work with him and also apologize.
I really like the partnering with them, not in the heat of the moment, to find them. I'm even imagining him maybe naming his favorite ones and giving them a name.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, one other question. So this is the 7.5-year-old. It's funny that when you started, you talked about a 3 and a 7-year-old. All right, one more if you have more time, she said. How much should I push my 7.5-year-old daughter with after-school activities? And this is kind of a COVID question. After a 1.5 years of decreased socialization, I find myself signing her up for more activities than I typically would pre-COVID. A good example is dance. She loves to be on stage and has great friends in her dance class. Now that it's being offered again, she said she doesn't want to do it, even though in the end she usually ends up liking it. I'd love to know your thoughts on decreasing struggle around after-school activities.
A lot of this depends on the child's temperament and their nature. For some kids, school is quite exhausting. And it's not so much about the dance class, but the timing of it. So is this a class that might just push her over her limit in terms of interaction and stimulation? Some kids, it's just highly stimulated to be in a classroom all day, and they just don't have more, or they don't experience themselves having more. It might be that this is a class that she does on a Saturday or she does over the summer. So I would factor that in because some kids just need more downtime than we give them. And I don't mean screen time. I mean looking out the window, digging, playing with puppets quietly, or, drawing and things like that, making music. On the other hand, if you don't think that's the case, then you could say, I have heard you say that you don't think you want to do this dance class that meets twice a week. And so here's my plan. There are these 3 things that I would like you to do three possibilities of after-school activities because it is so fun once you're there. And I'd like you to pick one, or I'd like you to pick two, so that you're not giving complete decision making over. You're not abdicating your role as the captain of the ship. You recognize as a child who might need more social engagement outside of a traditional classroom, which is kind of a very artificial way of promoting interactivity. There's so much rigidity into that these after school activities for some kids are really, really where they practice sharing and talking and all those kinds of things. So you might say, well, here's 4 and I want you to pick 2, or here's 3 and I want you to pick 1, sort of depending on how frequently that thing meets and how long the sessions are and that kind of thing. And then you can say, well, it looks like this is a decision you're having trouble making. Would you like me to make it for you? And we can try it for 2 months and then check in with to see if you think that was not the choice you wish you had made.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Beautiful. I like it. Yeah, I heard on you talking on some interview about how, each kid we get comes with their own temperament, right? And the 7.5, they're both amazing kids, and my niece is much she's full on in terms of she's shy at times, but at other times, like, really wants to be center stage and have everyone's attention. So, I think for her, having some way to engage in performing is a valuable thing.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about what you've learned on your journey of doing this work, about your journey as a thought leader. And I want to start here. What are some of the things you see show up consistently in your work around parenting, that dynamic, that you've seen show up in your work, in your relationship to work itself? So, for example, when you were talking about the captain, the lawyer, and the dictator, I often talk about a wounded child, responsible parent, rebellious adolescent as a triad.
Great.
That I often see entrepreneurs running around in, right? Something gets triggered in them, especially if it's their life's work, if it's an expression of who they are in the world.
Yeah.
Something gets triggered and they feel hurt and wounded, and so they stall out on something, and then they go, hey, I got to get up. I got to get to work. And so that responsible parent comes and berates them, right? And that works for a little while. And then they hate beating themselves up. So then the rebellious adolescent comes in and says, screw it. I don't want to do it. Right?
Wow.
And round we go. And I talk with them about developing a benevolent adult.
Beautiful.
That conscious, aware adult that can feel and parent the parts of them that get triggered on the journey of bringing their work to the world, but not be run by them. And I'm just curious, like, what you may not have ever thought of this, but I'm curious if there's anything where you've seen, oh, look at those parallels between the work with parenting and the work of being an entrepreneur and bringing thought leadership to the world.
No, I haven't really directly thought of that, but I do see myself using the things I teach with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am just, me. I've never been an enormously ambitious person. Like, I love what I do. We have a very large reach now. But I'm a quiet kind of person. Like, I like to be, I don't have big aspirations. I don't have, big jewelry or, I have a 11-year-old car. It's not like I'm, trying to get myself an airplane or anything like that.
Right.
So inside, sometimes there's the struggle that I have to just meet it with great love and compassion as that parent that I'm helping parents become. Parenting myself around, do you feel like you'd like to just not work today, Susie Q? Talking to myself. And
Yep.
honoring that, I think I've really been learning how to apply toward myself as a business owner some of the things that I'm helping parents do with their kids, which is to be present with what is, to be accepting, to trust more our bodies and the messages that we get. If like I'll get a lot of requests to do a lot of different things, and I will try and really listen to my body's reaction. Is that a yes or a no, and not talk myself into something the way I might have before. So I think it's interwoven with how I do the work that I do. Um, in terms of being kind of a thought leader, which I don't think of myself as an expert, honestly. I really try and get parents to know and feel empowered to be experts for their children. I can't possibly know what every single parent I work with, what their child needs. So I think I'm more about sort of a guide or comfort or somebody. We have a large community, and as I said, I have a membership and I'm doing a class soon, and there are places where I think people turn to me to kind of get a little bit of reparenting. And
Yeah.
and so I don't know if that's the same as a thought leader. I do think I'm probably trying to blaze a trail and encourage people to think about parenting differently. Um, but as I said, it's not like, I struggle with that, to be honest. Like, how do I
Yeah.
be who I
Thought
am and still
that.
deliver the message I feel called to deliver?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say, in my experience with you, I think you do a pretty bang up job of it.
No.
Uh, Seriously, Susan, just in terms of like, I mean, I said this at the beginning, you've always been like, who you are is who you are, and it's whether you're on stage or if I'm hanging out with you in the backyard around a fire pit,
Right.
like it's the same person. Um, I'm curious just to go one more kind of uh, take on this because a lot of a lot of what I think we've been taught in the world of business in general, or the world of work, full stop, is just push yourself and get the work done, right?
Hmm.
Pull yourself. I grew up in the Midwest. Pull
Me
yourself up
too.
from the bootstraps,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I'm curious how you balance. I mean, I so honor that, like, oh, requests come in. Let's see how this sits in my body. And thank you for saying yes to this.
No, of course.
Um,
No brainer.
how does this sit in is this a yes or no authentically, right? And then there's like, you've written a number of books, and to get that done, you actually have to sit down and write.
Yeah. And
Right?
I have what I call ADD-ishness. I don't like the label, but I have the brain, those traits of distractibility and impulsivity and hyperactivity and stuff like that.
So how do you dance with getting things done and
Mm.
honoring where your energy is,
Hmm.
again, thinking of that like captain of the ship versus dictator of my own life and my own work in the
Beautiful.
world.
I think now, because I'm in my 60s now, um, with a big, huge mountain of compassion and faith that um, I am not going to change the whole world. I'm going to impact as many lives as I possibly can. And more, what I'm doing is connecting with other people in my field with whom I vibrate at the same frequency, especially those who are a little bit younger, to kind of, you know, magnify, 1 + 1 doesn't make 2, it makes 11. So that I'm recognizing that I want to kind of collaborate with people who want to hold hands and sort of collectively, help each other, because sometimes one of us is just burnt out and tired and the other one picks up the slack. So that's part of it, is to realize that I'm not the savior of anybody. I'm just going to do my very best. And then I have a lot of structure. I have a lot of structure, meaning I do plan the events that I'm putting together, the classes, the programs, And I have a terrific assistant who we have a lot of fun. I've been through a few people before, and we've been together, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now, and we just have fun together. And she's a mom, and we hire on other people as needed. Eventually need to get somebody to do some film editing and some social media stuff. But I insist on having fun. I insist on only collaborating or doing things that feel good. I just don't say yes to anything else. And I'm not mean to myself. If I have committed to doing something, there have been not very many occasions where I just have, like yesterday, I needed to see my mother, and I had a couple of sessions, and I had to cancel them because that's my priority. So I'm pretty clear on my priorities, and I don't swim around in guilt when I have to make a change. But yeah, the structure is part of it, and sometimes I do have to work through something, and I don't want to, and I'm just super nice to myself, like, oh, and I'll talk to myself. I know, sweetheart, this is so hard, and you don't want to be doing it, and maybe you could do like 30 more minutes. So I'll do it almost, and then why don't we have that really yummy, piece of chocolate? Like I'll, dangle
Yeah.
something in front of myself.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
But I don't do the
All
old,
right.
come on now, you can do it. I'm just not mean
Right.
to myself. I just don't go there.
Susan, I love that you're sharing that because, like, so many people that I love and respect, especially, as they get older and wiser, that's one of the things I consistently hear. I just
Wow.
refuse to be mean to myself anymore.
Love it.
Just not interested in it, you know. And I think I'm learning that lesson. I think I'm much better than I was, and I think there's more for me to go. So thank you for the reminder. I appreciate it. So I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk about your journey around thought leadership, around trailblazing new work and new ideas, around being somebody who has woven spirituality and consciousness
Wow.
work into parenting. Um, I'm curious, like, what was it like to begin? Were people receptive? Did doors open because it was new and fresh?
Mm-hmm.
Or were they reticent to open because we don't want to talk about this? And so that's kind of one piece. And then the second piece is, and how has it changed over time?
Which is a lot. Yeah, thank you. Such a good question. I think part of what made it easier for me to blaze a trail was that I was well credentialed. I wasn't, um, I had a teaching credential. I had a master's degree in clinical psychology. I had done the 3,000 plus hours of internship. I had a license as a psychotherapist. So I had some gravitas. And I think it matters. I think that there is a way that
Yeah.
we get to differentiate ourselves by having what the world perceives as training and credibility. And I do think that that helped. Still, I started meditating in my teenage years in the middle of Kansas when, it was hardly heard of, and didn't talk about that part of my life for decades. And in fact, in my earlier in my career, I was hired to be the parenting expert weekly advice columnist for AOL and then Huffington Post. And I was that for many years. I was a paid weekly writer. And I got questions from that population. The AOL population particularly wasn't the kind of spiritual. It was just everybody had AOL.
Yeah.
And I never really mentioned, and by the way, you might also do some quiet breathing or. But I slowly started to incorporate that part of myself into the responses that I was giving to people who raised parenting questions. And eventually I was just flying my freak flag, like this is who I am and this is what and so much so that I think I lead now with there is no script for what you should say when your kids do X, Y, or Z. I'm not going to give you 10 handy tips, although I might give you 10 handy tips, but infused in all of those is going to be what's going on inside of you, what's getting triggered from you, what does that remind you of, what unfinished wound is rearing its ugly head when you where do you feel disempowered? How can you move through that and use that? So it's woven now very intricately. And I do think that for whatever reason that in today's day and age, it is of interest. I don't know that doors were closed to me, but because I think I would only show the side of me that was comfortable for somebody. But
Hmm.
eventually, I think now so many people are interested, and there are, this idea of conscious parenting has caught on with more mainstream. Although I think I'll always have a leg in both boats because I personally don't like the idea of approaching parenting as strictly about your stuff and some metaphysical thing. I am also avoid saying I need you too, and like I get down in the trenches with the practical stuff too, because
Yeah.
even if you're a very spiritually minded person, you need practical help.
I think that is a blanket statement for life.
Nice. Yeah.
uh, um, how do you think your message has changed over the years?
I think I'm probably bolder in leading with how our insides and what we experienced ourselves growing up, whatever the dysfunction or the trauma or the imprint, the kind of attachment, leading with how that influences your ability to be the captain of the ship, versus the lawyer and the dictator. I think people really like this because they can relate to it. It's familiar. Oh yeah, I have couples I've worked with, and behind each other's back when there's a conflict with a child, they'll go like,
The hands are a moving.
yeah, just
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
shorthand, a reminder. You don't want to go into this lawyer thing with Tommy. But I
Yeah.
do think that, and I also think that I just feel more confident. That the right people will come to me. Parents aren't used to spending money on programs, and I have to have a business to support the work I do. I do a ton of stuff that's free, and I am looking for more ways to give away what I do to those populations that can't afford it. And I don't ever charge very much, but I am still at the front of the pack or part of the front of the pack, trying to help parents who grew up as children of parents who didn't take parenting classes or read parenting
Hmm.
books. Like we're trying to change the conversation, say, you know what, there's no shame in saying I want to take a class, just in the same way that I'm taking this class on ADHD and marriage, because there's somebody who's got all this experience and I can, in a structured format, learn from her. I'm comfortable paying for that. And I think parents are still, well, yeah, my parents didn't pay for this kind of stuff and I came out okay. So I think that is still a harder sell. There are, of course, enough parents that are starting to reach into their pockets and spend a little time and money to become better parents. But it's, I wish it was more. I wish it was more. Of course, you're going to do that. Like you would do that to learn any other skill. Why wouldn't you invest in
Right.
learning to become a better parent? But it's, not everybody is. We're still subject to the kind of the programming that influenced our own growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, just one more question on this. Are there any aspects of your message that, like, dropped in, came through, you had an aha, and you're like, oh, that just felt super edgy at first,
Mm.
and like, am I really going to say this? Am I really going to share this? Like, has that happened for you? And if so, how do you dance with that?
Oh gosh, I would really have to think about that. A lot of what I do has dropped in, truly. Like
Yeah.
I I do feel that a lot of it just sort of came out, whether it was giving a talk. Like I used to do I still do a few phone sessions with people privately, but I used to do it more often. And sometimes I'd take notes like, oh, wow, that's just really good. Like I don't even
Yeah.
claim it. It's just so, yeah, it flows, especially when I'm teaching. I don't know. I think the idea that, for instance, parents will sometimes come to me and say, my kids drive me crazy. And they'll say, no, they don't. Like, don't foist that responsibility onto your children. It's sort of like taking responsibility for our reactivity, not in a way that's like it's your fault, but it's just like, don't put that on your children, because children intuitively know it's not their job to take care of us emotionally.
Yeah.
That when you say, I only yelled because you were misbehaving, that's a little bit controversial for some parents. Like, well, why do you yell? Because my kids misbehave? No, those are separate things.
Yeah.
I can see where it
Yeah.
might trigger you. It might push you to have to, find a new strategy that doesn't feel very intuitive, but we don't give our children that level of responsibility and power.
Well, probably two more questions. One, what do you feel is most pressing in the world of parenting today?
Every time there's a school shooter or there's a terrorist attack or there's somebody who does some horrible thing politically or whatnot, I view that as that person went through something very difficult as a child. You don't get someone who's abusing masses of people or exploiting people or killing people or wanting to harm others who had a loving, safe, easy, secure childhood, unless there's some, you know, biological, neurobiological factor, because we do know that there are loving, caring parents whose children lose their way. So I'm not speaking with a complete wide brush, but in general, the thing that drives the work I do is that if we can encourage parents to do this work, to break the pattern of how they were raised using perhaps shame or punishment or withholding love, withdrawing, humiliating, yelling and screaming, becoming aggressive. If we can help today's parents break that pattern, if it's something that is in their blood and bones from having lived it, then the children they raise will become humanitarians. They will become compassionate leaders. They will become caring neighbors. And that's why, in a way, I feel like working with parents or helping parents transform how they show up with their children and raise children who are more secure, loving, caring, compassionate is the most important work that could be done to change the world. You know, we can try from the top down. We can try and you know, legislate new rules and voting rights and all these things. But if you look at why people are greedy and why they're, you know, instituting the kind of policies that aren't serving humanity but only a small select group, this is a product of how they were, what they believe. You know, this scarcity, this limitation, this, it's all look out for number one and no one else. So I think that the biggest thing for parents is to be brave in learning how to break those patterns and set a new path for themselves and their children, not only because it makes it more fun to raise your kids when everybody's connected and loving and happy and feels safe and accepted, but also taking the longer view, this is how we will save the world. So, not a small thing.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I look at my niece and nephew and my sister's two kids, my nieces, in terms of like, yeah, these are the kids inheriting the world. And if the last few years showed us anything, like, holy crap, this is not the world I was brought into. And if we are going to have a chance of surviving, we're going to have children who become these leaders, who can steer us in a new direction. So I am so grateful for your time, grateful for your work and your voice in this world, grateful to call you a friend.
Likewise.
On that note, I know you have a course coming up. I'd love for you to share just a little bit about it. I think we're going to be able to put this out, I think, the day before your course starts, but just share a little bit about it, because I think it's needed work.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a monthly membership and I meet twice a month with our members, and that's a lot of fun, and that will go on. But I used to do an intensive a couple of times a year, and I haven't done it for 4 years. So starting February 17th, and people can pick up and catch up if they register after that, I'm going to just walk people through a very structured curriculum about how to be the captain of the ship. Everything from working with our own trauma, our own kind of blind spots, understanding how to move children through frustration so that they become flexible and adaptable rather than aggressive. I fold in the work of Byron Katie because she and I have done some things together, and I love that work. We work with attachment and deepening attachment through the 6 stages that I have used, a model that is a wonderful model that children move through in the first 6 years of life. I mean, we talk in depth. People can visit my website, susanstiffelman.com, and there'll be a link. But there's so much more that I'm not mentioning where it's, again, with small group practices and role plays and me coaching and answering questions. So it's a very personalized, very interactive, short-term immersion, with the goal being that by the end, you've internalized some of these things. They're not just something you heard in a really cool book or podcast and you hope that you remember to apply, but you actually, they just feel more natural than doing it the old way. That's kind of the objective. So I'd love for anybody who's interested to join me. That's going to be such a great class, and I don't know when I'll offer it again, if I do. So
that's awesome. Good. So we can find that at your website, yes?
Yeah, SusanStiffelman.com.
All right, so that's SusanStiffelman.com. That is SusanStiffelman.com, and all that will be in the show notes. So, my dear, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to be here with you, and I just know there's people that are going to hear this and didn't know they needed it. So thank you for sharing your gifts and your voice.
And thank you for doing this amazing series and lifting up so many with your bright and shiny wisdom. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Hey there, thanks so much for listening in. If this conversation was powerful, if it stirred your soul or inspired your journey, then be sure to share it with a friend. Just copy and paste the link wherever you're listening to this podcast and text that link right now to a friend that you think would be inspired by this episode. And if this is your first time here, be sure to click that subscribe button over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and review so I can get to know you and your thoughts better. To learn more about the work I do with emerging and established paradigm changers, go to thecourageousmessenger.com. That's all for today. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the next episode.